Hey, welcome to the Scenic View, a new series where we'll look at two different scenes side by side to see what principles of storytelling we can pull out and apply to your own work in progress. Let's face it, writing can be frustrating.
Useless, empty brain.
Creating a story that works is no small task. Creating a story that works and satisfies and surprises the audience is even more a challenge. Every writer gets stuck now and then. It's only natural. But to get unstuck, writers must reach for storytelling tools and techniques that give them specific, workable tasks in order to get back on track. And critically examining what works and also what doesn't work for you in the stories you consume helps to develop your own storytelling toolkit for whenever you find yourself in a tricky situation. So today we'll be taking a closer look at a scene from the 4th episode of HBO's The Last of Us and comparing it to an early scene in Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, why look at this particular pair of scenes, you might ask? The Last of Us is a television drama based off a popular video game that takes place in a post-apocalyptic America overrun with parasitic mind-controlling fungus zombies. And Star Wars, well, I probably don't need to tell you about Star Wars. But these two scenes are not actually all that different on a functional level. And that brings us to the first storytelling principle, which is, know the type of scene you're writing. The story you write is going to have anywhere from a handful of scenes to well over 100. Each one of these is a unique opportunity to drive the narrative forward, reveal true character, and delight the audience. But not all scenes are created equal. Some have very specific functions within a story, and as such come with their own set of built-in expectations and limitations. Knowing which type of scene you're writing before you begin goes a long way to crafting a satisfying and memorable scene that does its part in service to the overall story.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
Therefore, I suggest you start treating scenes as if they have their own genres, because they certainly do. To talk genre is usually to refer to story as a whole. Genre is a sort of packaging label on the outside of a story that gives you an idea what to expect inside. Stories in the same genre share characteristics in form, style, and even subject matter. There's a fascinating history of the early attempts to classify the dramatic genres by the likes of Carlo Gozzi and George Pulte that I won't get into here, but the modern understanding of genre for writers in the age of movies, television, and video games owes a great deal to Robert McKee and his seminal 1998 work, Story, in which McKee attempted a comprehensive categorization of all the genres. Later, Sean Coyne would build on McKee's categories to create his innovative five-leaf clover approach to genre in the Story Grid. And John Truby's latest book, The Anatomy of Genres, is all about how, you guessed it, genre impacts almost every other choice a writer makes in the telling of a story. All these works explore the idea that story genres come preloaded with audience expectation about what roles the characters are going to take, what values are at stake across the story, and what conventions and tropes are used throughout. For instance, you might expect the values of success and failure expressed in a performance story.
Should I go again?
No, thanks, I've seen enough.
Or a femme fatale role to feature in a detective crime story. Or a hero at the mercy of the villain scene in an action or thriller story. To understand genre is to know what arena your story plays in so that you properly satisfy the audience's expectations while also pushing the story beyond those expectations. I suggest likewise care and attention be brought down to the level of the individual scene in order to craft compelling scenes. What I'm calling scene types are just genres for scenes. They come with their own sets of expectations, conventions, and roles. So the two scenes we're looking at today are examples of interrogation scenes. An interrogation is a quick and easy to understand conflict between an interrogator and the interrogated, with a clear object of desire. Usually some crucial information both are struggling to either uncover or conceal. Interrogation scenes are the bread and butter of the crime genre, but the scene type is familiar enough, its designated roles so ingrained in modern audiences as to be easily recognized in other story genres, such as fantasy.
You're a monster.
In these scenes, both story antagonists question someone held at their mercy for information. Kansas City resistance leader Kathleen Coughlin has recently wrestled control of the city away from the tyrannical Fedra government and now wants the whereabouts of known Fedra sympathizer Henry Burrell.
You know where Henry is.
And Kylo Ren of the First Order wants the missing map to Luke Skywalker.
The map to Skywalker. We know you found it.
Both scenes are also the viewer's introduction to the antagonist, and the writer's one and only opportunity to make a first impression of the threat posed by this antagonist. A scene type like interrogation comes preloaded with the threat of punishment hanging over the conversation, and usually a huge power differential between the interrogated and the interrogator. Often interrogators are forced into positions where they must act on that power difference to prove they mean business when they don't get what they want, and these two scenes certainly deliver on that expectation. In both stories, limiting the scene to a single, clear, readable type, such as interrogation, lent an organizing principle through which the writers could effectively convey who's who in this world and why the audience should care. Knowledge of the scene type gave the writers guidelines to follow when structuring the scenes, and focused the conflict through a familiar premise so that they could have more fun playing with the dialogue and the twists and turns of the scene within that well-defined sandbox. So start thinking in scene types as you write within your chosen story genre, and become aware of the promises your scenes make that your beats will need to fulfill in order to satisfy audience expectation. If you're writing a meet-cute scene inside a horror story, it may help to think of the scene as a mini-story that now has love genre expectations that must be met in order to be readable as a meet-cute scene within your horror story genre. And that same thing applies whether you're writing a chase scene in a rom-com, a discovery of a clue in a western, or a trial in a fantasy.
How is this a fair trial? Our lawyer is a Morty.
Scene types can help you innovate on top of old ideas while remaining clear and focused as you tell your story. Alright, the next storytelling principle we're going to look at is starting the scene as late as possible, or enter late, exit early. Hitchcock said drama is life with the dull parts cut out. This principle is pretty self-explanatory, but I want to reiterate here the importance of knowing your scene type when it comes to writing tighter, more focused scenes. It's hard to trim fat if you aren't sure what's muscle and bone. The choice to write these two scenes as interrogation scenes gave the writers some parameters to determine what was relevant information they needed to include. And in the case of the Last of Us scene, just jump into it.
I told you, I was alone. I haven't seen any of those people since that night. What else do you want me to say?
I don't know, the truth?
The scene starts in media res with an answer to a question we never hear, but we don't really need to. Because the scene type is readable, and we've likely already watched hundreds of interrogation scenes before, we can backfill any introductory throat clearing that might start an interrogation. Here, we enter the scene right as it's getting interesting, right before things are about to change. In The Force Awakens, we don't start in media res, but notice the scene gets right to the business of interrogation with little deviation. Kylo Ren exits his ship and looks around menacingly, and already stormtroopers are bringing forth the old man for questioning. The dialogue gets straight to Kylo's object of desire in the third line. In fact, the whole scene runs through all the beats of the interrogation and subsequent execution in under a page. In Kathleen's scene, the interrogation itself is cut short when a knock at the door moment, in this case an outside alarm, calls her attention away, inciting yet another scene. In both cases, we start late and get out early, not wasting any time with things unrelated to the information being asked about or the characters involved in the interrogation itself. I don't really have much else to say about this principle, so I'll just take the advice to heart and keep things moving. Which means we're on to the next storytelling principle, and that's to use exposition as ammunition. So we're back to Papa McKee for this one. If you've read either story or dialogue, you'll have come across this concept before. Exposition is information the audience needs to know about setting, character backstories, prior plot events, and historical context, necessary to make sense of the story being told. The problem is, it feels incredibly clunky for characters to all of a sudden wax eloquent about their past.
God knows it's been hard. Since what? Since Dad left? Since Mom started drinking? Since we're going to lose the house?
Or explain to each other how technology works.
I added a booster using microfabricated radio frequency quadrupoles to speed up particles before entering the DLA device. Portable, wearable flexibility.
Audiences intuitively feel the artifice in these long-winded exposition dumps. They sense the writer trying to sneak in information they couldn't otherwise introduce organically, and the result is a painfully transparent recitation of the necessary facts. McKee's maxim holds that your characters are already well aware of their world, their history, each other, and themselves, and that writers should therefore, at pivotal moments, let your characters use what they know as ammunition in their struggles to get what they want. In other words, characters should only reach for expository information if they plan on using that context to hit another character in the face with it.
I don't want to have to talk about it at all. I'm on vacation.
I'm on vacation is not sterile information. Here it's used as a tool to guilt a husband for bringing up a touchy subject at the wrong time.
My dad dying and then
It was a year
drinking
ago.
and...
I don't give a shit about your goddamn feelings.
And saying your dad died a year ago is not just dating an event. Here it's saying, that excuse doesn't work on me any longer. Exposition used as ammunition doesn't feel false because it's purpose-driven first and foremost, used tactically by the characters to get closer towards whatever it is they ultimately want.
There. Have I satisfied the necessary conditions for you to talk?
Kathleen, for God's sake. I delivered you. I held you in my hands. I never told them anything about your brother.
Through the dialogue, the audience learns the man Kathleen threatens with death is the very doctor who helped bring her into life. The doctor doesn't explain this to Kathleen, who would already know all this, in order that the audience can learn the specifics of their relationship, though that is a beneficial side effect. He uses it as a plea to appeal to Kathleen's humanity, to her compassion and sense of decency, in order to save his own life. Now let's compare that nicely motivated exposition to our other scene.
Look how old you've become.
Something far worse has happened to you.
You know what I've come for.
I know where you come from. Before you called yourself Kylo Ren.
And it's about here where things start to go off the rails for me in this scene. We've got a clear interrogation scene type, a menacing antagonist, and the scene wastes no time getting straight into the business. But the characters speak with that, as you know, Bob, delivery, explaining things to each other they should already be well aware of.
The map to Skywalker. We know you found it. And now you're going to give it to the First Order.
The First Order rose from the dark side. You did not.
Now I want to be fair. Like the scene from The Last of Us, some of the expository lines directed at Kylo in this exchange are also an appeal to his better nature, before he joined the dark side. But this tactic has no noticeable reaction in Kylo and moves the old man nowhere closer to self-preservation, yet the man continues to spit out more facts about Kylo's history because the audience needs to know them.
I'll show you the dark side.
You may try. But you cannot deny the truth. That is your family.
It's weak ammunition that misses better opportunities to slip in actual motivation for this character's speech as action, which also neatly ties in with the final storytelling principle we're going to look at, and that's to make sure to steelman the opposing argument whenever you create conflict. One of the reasons I think this scene from The Force Awakens reads as rather weak, emotionally, is that the characters aren't making very good cases for the values they supposedly inhabit, values which should be in conflict with one another as they seek their objects of desire, which should also be the reason this scene exists in the first place. The characters here are weighed down by an obligation to impart dry facts about the world, rather than crafting an argument about how they should exist in that world. In the old man's 4 speaking lines, he offers nothing more than a list of details about Kylo's transformation since they last met. And Kylo is so preoccupied with his big kick-the-dog moment in order to look tough.
You want me to show you tough? I'll show you tough.
You always made me aware of what I was doing wrong, and I was falling short!
He kills the old man before he gets the information he ostensibly came for only a few lines earlier. The conflict feels cartoonishly simple, with good and evil reduced to a binary paradigm in which bad guys are bad, know they're bad, and revel in their badness. But life is rarely so black and white, and story conflict often reflects this morally gray complexity, even in stories as grand and mythological as Star Wars.
I know there is good in you. The Emperor hasn't driven it from you fully.
Every character believes themselves to be the hero protagonist of their own story. They operate according to their unique set of personal beliefs, moral foundations, and motivations in order to get what they want. So when you get 2 characters standing in each other's way, the result should be a fiery clash of well-reasoned values in opposition.
I mean, can you imagine if people didn't believe what things they'd get up to?
Exact same thing they do now, just out in the open.
Vicky, I'm a big girl, okay? If I want to sleep with him, I will.
Christina, he's a total stranger. This is impulsive even for you.
But I want to marry someone I love.
Strange marriage it would be if you loved them from the start.
Right. Love's an illusion. It's the only illusion that counts, my friend. Says who? Anyone who's ever been in love.
In some ways, this is really an echo of the rule, write characters to the top of their intelligence, one of many insights in Daniel Joshua Rubin's book, 27 Essential Principles of Story. Rubin's advice doesn't mean all your characters need to be high IQ, big nog orators, but that characters should act to the top of their potential, that they bring their A game in pursuit of their desires, because, ideally, they actually believe what they're doing is critically important, or else they wouldn't be doing it.
this will begin to make things right.
Characters are not prohibited from making mistakes or doing stupid, misguided, or outright evil things in your story, but the audience should be able to understand the reasoning behind their actions. And understanding both sides of a conflict means being able to state both positions in the most defensible manner possible.
I wonder if this is the cell where my brother was beaten to death.
No, you were wronged. And I'm sorry. But this has gone too far. It has to stop.
It has to stop now, you mean? Now that you're in the cell. But before, people dying was okay. When you were safe and protected and ratting on your neighbors to Fedra.
Notice again the wonderful world-building exposition being used as ammunition here, with each character using their words as weapons to accuse the other of having crossed a moral line. Kathleen's interrogation tactics are cruel, perhaps beyond the pale, but they are carefully reasoned and well argued, rooted in a genuine motivation to track down her brother's murderers and avenge his death. For his part, the doctor is revealed to have traded in secrets that led to the abuse and death of his neighbors in order to keep his own family safe. But that doesn't make him wrong to suggest Kathleen is perpetuating the same cycle of violence now that the shoe's on the other foot. We don't have to agree with either character's tactics, but we can definitely understand them, and this makes the conflict in the scene compelling. I don't really understand why Kylo kills a prisoner before he gets the information he asked for. And I don't understand why the old man doesn't change tactics when his listing of facts about Kylo has no effect. Unless his goal here was never to survive this encounter, but instead land a blow to Kylo about the ways of the Force and family, in what I'm assuming the writers hoped would be an echo of Obi-Wan's sacrifice to Darth Vader in A New Hope. Which it transparently is.
I know what that is!
But member berries do not necessarily a compelling conflict make. So be sure to carefully build each side of the conflict in your scenes. Don't strawman the opposing position in favor of an easy victory for your protagonists, lest their success feel inevitable and cheap. Give the audience a fairly evenly matched contest of values, and they'll be intrigued and delighted. Give them a clearly one-sided fight, and they'll intuitively feel they're watching a morality play.
That's the bad guy.
So that's going to do it for this episode of The Scenic View. Was it helpful? Was it fun? Did I make you think about anything you might use in your own work in progress? Let me know in the comments below, and also let me know which scenes you want to see broken down next. And if you want more scene writing tips and tricks, make sure to head on over to the channel page for more content. There isn't much there at the moment, but I'm working hard to change that. So consider becoming a patron over on Patreon to help me continue to make more of them. And thank you to everyone who's dropped a kind word on the channel so far and encouraged me to keep going. Your support is genuinely appreciated. Happy writing, and I'll see you in the next video.